Well, how about this, ladies and gentlemen? Can you see this? Look. Do you see that? Can you read that? I don't know. My software is terrible. But anyway, yesterday that was not there. And I couldn't look up. I could not look up what they were doing. So, but today it's here. So, kudos, you fixed it. I didn't even ask you to fix it, but you fixed it. So they're getting better. Yeah. All right. Let's continue with this insanity. Before I continue, let me make a comment about yesterday's. You see, I consider myself a TRIMET Board scholar because I watch it. I try to pay attention when I'm watching it, but there's always like a dozen distractions. But then I watch myself watching it to see what I missed. Okay, see, that's how seriously I take this. So I actually watch it twice so I can see what I missed when I watched it the first time. And at the end of this last one, they were talking about their little shelter. They call it not COVID, but COBID, which is COBID. What is it? COBID? Okay, certification. What is COBID in Oregon? Okay, can you read it? The primary goal of certification is so you have to be a certified business to be COBID. You have to get some kind of license for this. What the hell is this? Certification of COBID? Government projects may have specific requirement or targets for the contracts to be awarded to minority-owned, women-owned, service, disability-owned, and emerging businesses. You may qualify for more than one certification. We encourage you to apply for as many. So you have to apply for this. Look at this. What is this? So you have to you have to actually apply for this thing. It's not something. So you have to go to the state of Oregon and get certified. But anyway, the point I was going to make was I don't know how this ever happened. I've always been a believer in like equality for everybody, white, black, trans, gay, anybody. I believe in equality for everybody. Everybody should have the same chance. Now we know that hasn't been the way it has been in the past, but at this point in our history, there's so much suffering going on right in front of your eyes, and we who listen to the scanner actually get a live view of the suffering. It's right there. This is not newspaper. This is not media. You're listening to the real deal, and you can hear how bad it is out there. And the people that are suffering are not just people of color. Okay, so we have to stop thinking like that in this society because the suffering is now much bigger than that. It's gone beyond that. Okay, so this idea of inclusion and diversity is nothing but a lie now because there's just too much suffering and it's all races. Okay, and I saw there was something from the Onion I posted on my Twitter. It said race will now be classified by wealth. If you have 100,000, if you have 1 million or more, you are now white. Okay, and I think that's true. I think that's how society is now. It's like everything is based on your economic status, not your race. And I agree that is what's actually happening here. You have people like the Obamas who got $60 million the day he walked out of the goddamn office to write a book which he hadn't even written. And the first thing he did was go buy some giant mansion on Martha's Vineyard. And this was supposed to be the hero of the black underclass. And he was a total fraud. He was a complete fraud. Or you can even look at Sam. So he's black. So what? What good is he doing for the system? I don't see anything. Okay, so you're Asian like Kathy or Hispanic like Ozzy. What good are they doing? They're just doing the exact same thing that the white people were doing, except now they're minorities doing it. And how does that mean any change for people that actually need help? It means no change. It's a smokescreen. So I don't know about this COVID stuff, but I also want to know if these people here, these TriMet people, really cared about people, they wouldn't be doing, well, we'll do a contract for some business. They would create a union wage. They would create a whole department of shelter repair, okay? And they would pay those people union wages, and they would hire them based on their versions of inclusion or whatever. But they would be they do that with the bus. You can see that they have all these different people driving the buses now. So there's obviously a concerted effort to inclusion, all these different types of people behind the wheel. Well, they can do that with their little business model here. They can, if they cared about people, they would create a program internally, union wage, union benefits, to repair bus shelters. But that's not what they're doing. They're doing this, we're going to contract out. That means somebody's going to make profit off of that. That means some owner who is going to hire people will make profit by virtue of being part of the ownership class. You know what I'm trying to say? So it makes it very sketchy in my mind. It's like a version of capitalism that shouldn't exist. And they're limiting that to, it's got to be, these people have to be licensed by the state, and I do not like it at all. Now let's continue. Let's see how far I can get with before I start puking.
Again, I'm going to reconvene the TriMet Board of Directors for the remainder of our business meeting today.
Right.
And the final resolution before us today is Resolution 23-03-13, authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with...
All right. Here it is. See, they didn't have this yesterday. We didn't get to see this. They had it, and it wasn't there. But today it's here, so let's see. Better bus. Okay, this is another thing. Okay, this better bus. Now, I have a lot of problem with this better bus. And why do I have a problem? Because what these elite executives did, this great black man and all of his diverse board, they dismantled their transit system. Okay, they dismantled it intentionally. I'm convinced 100% they did it intentionally. They got all that COVID money. It was 90 million or more. That was specifically, I read the material. It's to keep the service going. That's what it was for. They did not do that. They unilaterally cut the service 20%, didn't ask for any public feedback, didn't do any Title VI garbage. They just did it. Okay, the better bus thing was an invention of the TriMet elite class, who happened to be diverse. Just another more proof that the diversity doesn't help anybody, really. It's just, you just put these diverse people in positions of power, and they do the same thing that the white people did. Okay, they continue to be like an Obama. He got in there because he was supposed to be black, and he was going to help all these black people. What did he do? He bailed out the banks, and he kicked out 6 million people out of their homes. He was useless. He was a neoliberal, and that's what this agency is. So what are they going to do? So let's see. The resolution requests TriMet Board of Directors to authorize a general manager to execute an intergovernmental agreement with Metro. So here there are two tax-funded places, funded by the same exact taxpayers. Metro is funded by the citizens of the Portland area, and so is TriMet, two separate taxes. So Metro is responsible for approving expenditure to fund support work in critical transit corridors. This work includes projects to relieve highway bottlenecks. What does that have to do with you? Active transportation, which has got nothing to do with transit, okay? Active transportation is bicycling and walking. That's it. Why do you even care about that? Safe school routes and implement the regional and enhanced transit corridor. Now, why are they even talking about this stuff while there's services in shambles? I'll tell you why. Because they are in another world. They are not in the world that we're in. They are in this world of elites where they do this shit. They move money around. They're making a whole bunch of, all these people involved with this are making six-figure salaries. And it's just a joke. I just find it to be a joke. TriMet, okay. TriMet, $2 million for active transportation. So $2 million that has nothing to do with buses and trains. So there you go. They're taking your TRIMET funds and using it for stuff that's got nothing to do with buses and trains. Let's hear what they say.
Metro for the Better Bus Program. Mr. General Manager, your comments, please.
Thanks, President Simmons, members of the board. This resolution is designated to advance TriMet's partnership with Metro and commitment to the region for the Better Bus Program. The Better Bus Program is a new name for the Enhanced Transit Corridors, or ETC. That program, which is led by Metro, supports work to increase transit ridership by improving speed, reliability, and capacity with efforts focused on the region's most critical transit corridors. ETC, or Better Bus, as
it's also called a pork barrel. That doesn't help anybody. That's what this is. It's a pork barrel that doesn't help anybody.
It's called now, identifies projects where improvements are most needed and can be implemented quickly for near immediate results, such as our bus-only lanes and transit signal prioritization. Based on successes achieved in the first 5 years of the program, TriMet and Metro would like to keep working on Better Bus.
What successes? What? You have a dysfunctional transit system. Okay, you finally have enough operators for the bus, but the trains are still short. And the buses are junk. I don't know what the failure rate is, but I hear 100 calls a day on just the stupid doors.
Projects together. The proposed IGA outlines funding mechanism. Included is a $5 million contribution from Metro and a $5 million from TriMet via State Transportation Improvement Funds, or STIF. The board approved expenditure of the STIF funds for the Better Bus project last December. The IGA directs that once Metro and TriMet...
Let's remind you that the STIF funds were the tax increase without... That was the psychopathic people that call themselves legislatures forced a transit increase, tax increase down your throat. You know, these are parasites. All these senators, representatives, all of those people are the parasite class. And they passed a tax on all Oregon without Oregonians' approval. That's the STIF fund.
Identify and select qualified Better Bus projects. TriMet will work with local jurisdictions to allocate the STIF funds to procure contractors and implement projects. Construction work from this agreement.
It's all contractors. That means it's all profit. It's all for profit. Contractors means there's a profit motive. None of it's in-house. It's all to make money for people.
Is expected to occur by early 2026. Direct budget impact.
Early 2026? What the fuck are you doing?
On this decision is limited, as Metro funding will pay for the project selection and design. TriMet's financial contribution comes through STIF funding from ODOT, and your approval is recommended.
Thank you so much, General.
All right, according to him, it's not the TriMet tax. This is the tax grab. Okay, so it's not your TriMet payroll tax. According to him, this is coming from the tax grab money, and they're going to give it to all these contractors for some nebulous baloney that just doesn't make any sense to me, and that's not until 2026 on top of it all.
Manager Dessou. Is there a motion to approve this resolution?
Come on, speak up.
Thank you, Director Edwards. Is there a second?
Where is Edwards? He's in a hallway. Look, he's in a hallway. There's the exit, and there's a fire alarm. He's actually in like a stairwell here. What's he doing in a stairwell?
Second.
Thank you, Director Lewis. It's been moved and seconded. Now, are there any comments or questions? Director Gonzalez.
Uh-oh.
Thank you, President Simmons. Clarification question, please.
Coach, she's leaving along with that Bauman lady. That's the man I want as the chairman, Ozzy. He has extreme entertainment value for us, and he's smart. But you know, he's a shill. But I would enjoy him being the next chairman of this board, and I think he deserves a position too. Okay, he's been a faithful TriMet shill, and he'll continue shilling. But he's entertaining at least, and he's smart at least. He's probably the smartest guy on the board. Actually, I really believe that.
I understand there will be shared funds. Should this pass, the two agencies would contribute, it sounds like equal amounts, 5 million each. The contracting mechanism, however,
So Ozzy, what happened to your eyes? Because you've never worn glasses before. What happened?
if there are, it looks like they're going to be soliciting some contracts out of this work. Does Metro take over the approval of those contracts? Is that threshold being sent to the Metro board, or are we also giving contracting authority at any level to Metro's staff?
Very good question. I think that's a very reasonable question. Who approves the contracts? Who approves the pork?
I'm happy to take that.
What, you can't answer
thank
that,
you.
Sam? You need somebody to answer that for you? Jesus Christ.
Director Gonzalez for the question. It's a good question. This is an interesting partnership in that the way that we're approaching these projects is they're oftentimes, most of the time, they actually are somebody else's project. So in the cases of the project, let's say on Everett Street or Burnside recently, those are actually PBOT projects. And so they are actually dealing with the contracting, and we are contributing design and collaboration with them as they move through that process. And so in this case, we'll actually be contributing some money to actually move some of those forward.
So this is just pork barrel. They just send the money over to the pork barrel.
In the last phase, we actually did a little bit of that as well. And so I think that would be the continued pattern.
In that example, then, would PBOT be the contracting authority who would
Notice how that guy just did not answer his question. He did not answer his question.
select the vendor?
Correct. And in this case, we're going to be working with other partners within the region as well. So
Thank you for clarifying
So the answer is no. TriMet does not control who gets the contract.
that. And I'm slightly less familiar with some of the procurement standards that would be applied to this, but I would imagine that with respect to TriMet's values of equity, inclusion, and
Ozzy's going to go for the OPID or whatever they call COBID. Equity, inclusion. People are dying in the streets, but we're going to keep harping on this and pretend that it's real.
accessibility to these procurement opportunities, that some of the things that we've brought into contracting standards would be part of that selection criteria. Could you speak to perhaps whether that's taken place or whether there will be separate standards applied to this fund?
I can't speak to it directly. In the last phase, I was not actually.
He was not, this is not being handled by TriMet. He just told you that. TriMet's not in control of this. They just give them the money.
A part of that process. It's certainly something we could bring back to the board and inform you about.
But I'll just add, though, contracting to date, if you recall, last month we were here approving the design and planning and design contract, and so that is meeting our standards and the participation goals. So.
Good. Well, I certainly would love that TriMet keeps an eye on how these funds are allocated and through contracting, whether it's Metro, City of Portland, or TriMet that gets to award them. I think that making sure we have some community standards, some community benefit standards attached to them is really the important piece of this.
I'll make sure we also follow up with both PBOT and Metro on the comments that you've made.
Thank you.
I don't see any other comments or questions, so I'm going to call for the vote. All in
Give them the
favor,
money.
please say aye.
Aye.
Give us the money.
I didn't hear everyone's aye. Is there an opposition? No. All right.
Yeah, why don't you
Motion
just-
carries.
why don't
Thank you.
just streamline this process, go. I'm going to consider this resolution unanimously opposed unless somebody speaks up. Stop this silliness.
So very much.
Boy, this just goes on. This is a long meeting.
So that concludes the resolutions for today, but we do have two ordinances for first reading. And we're now going to move to the first reading and public hearing for ordinance 372, which proposes service changes for this May. I'll ask General Counsel Shelley Devine to read the ordinance by title only.
Stop. We'll read it right here. All right. Let's read it. Okay. What is it? Ordinance 372 will make bus changes and revise route designate. Oh, in conjunction with Sam, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so they've already done the service changes. We've already seen what they're doing. Line 70, which the media says is the most unreliable bus line, and which is a lie. Okay, so this is for those two things. There's nothing here that's controversial. I mean, they've already made this decision. What is this now? During outreach for the 70, ATU members expressed concern about the line operating on Milwaukee instead of along 17th Ave to the Center Street. Some operators use, yeah, I was just talking about this yesterday, to get the road release from the garage. In response to this, TriMet proposes upgrading line 17 from downtown to Holgate 136 to frequent service. What? This would double the number of 7. I thought they were taking it off of Center Street. Well, I just had who did I have this conversation with? Just yesterday. I think it was Jason. I thought they were going off Center Street. Well, apparently we're wrong about that.
Thank you, Director Simmons. Ordinance number 372 of the Tri-County Metropolitan Transportation District of Oregon, adopting May 2023 service changes and revising route designations. This is the first reading and public hearing.
Thank you. Before we hold a public hearing, Mr. General Manager, do you have or do staff have any
hold all the public hearings in the beginning of the meeting? Jesus.
additional comments?
Yeah, thanks, President Simmons. Members of the board, if approved, we are prepared to make these adjustments in May of this year. So just a couple of months away. The two routes that would see the most significant changes are the line 17, which serves parts of inner northeast downtown and southeast Portland. We're going to improve to the frequent service. And line 70, which also serves inner northeast Portland through southeast Portland to Milwaukee, has an important route change that we will discuss. So here with me as Director of Mobility Planning and Policy, Tom Mills, and Planner
It's
Luke
Tom
Norman.
Mills, everybody.
They're here with a close...
Tom Mills. Tom Mills, he's the one that's really actually running the place. I'm pretty sure about that. He's the only one that actually knows what's going on with all this.
To look at changes and findings of the Title VI analysis.
The Title
Thank
VI
you.
analysis.
Thank you, Director Simmons.
The Title VI window dressing. It doesn't mean anything. That's an extra level of bureaucracy for us to pay people for.
President Simmons and board, and thank you, Sam. As Sam mentioned, we'll go to the next slide. As Sam mentioned, we would like to speak to you today about the ordinance to approve service changes to both lines 70 and line 17. And we'll go to the next slide, please. I'd like to first start with line 70. So line 70 is a line that we started looking at last summer. The line itself operates on Milwaukee Boulevard, and it goes through a freight crossing at 11th and 12th Avenues. It's a very busy freight crossing. The line is blocked several times a day, and sometimes for more than an hour. And when that occurs, we have to reroute the line up to Southeast 21st Avenue to Powell Boulevard in the southbound direction. In the northbound direction, we use the Martin Luther King Jr. Viaduct. But as a result, line 70 has the worst on-time performance of any line on the system by far. Additionally, while looking at this and what could we do about this, there were two collisions at Southeast Powell and 26th Avenue, one fatal horrifically. The other was luckily just an injury, but it was a student at Cleveland High School. And this prompted a look, not just by TRIMET, but by PBOT, by ODOT, spearheaded by Senator Taylor and Representative Noss, both of the Oregon legislature. They held a community forum in which we heard from the community, particularly the bicycle community, that they wanted to see how we
The bicycle community, they hold the most sway of everybody.
could better improve safety for everyone in that area. We'll go to the next slide. So what we proposed doing, and you can see here on this map, the solid line being the existing route and the dotted line being the proposed route. What we are proposing to do is to have the line operate on Milwaukee Boulevard to Southeast Powell Boulevard, turn east on Powell Boulevard to Southeast 21st, where we already currently operate buses, at least in the southbound direction today, during a freight blockage. And then operate north on Southeast 21st to Southeast Ladd, and then through Ladd back to its regular route. Now, I know you've heard some discussion about, well, you know, should we go to Southeast 26? Should we stay on Southeast 21st? There are a number of reasons we are choosing to recommend Southeast 21st. Southeast 26 already has bus service on it, line 10. And what we find with line 10 is that students, when they're in the southbound direction, when they come to school, they get off the bus, and rather than walk to the crosswalk, they walk behind the bus, cross the street mid-block, walking out from behind the bus into traffic to the school. And this is because the entrance of the school is mid-block. At the end of the day, likewise, students flood out of the school, they flood the street as they cross, and then go to the bus stop. We are concerned that adding more buses to this intersection will create more of that behavior. I will say that PBOT is looking at building an island and crosswalk mid-block to help address that, but it hasn't quite happened yet. Additionally, we are concerned about operating and turning buses through that intersection, which already has 2 bus lines going through it, lots of trucks, lots of bicyclists, lots of students crossing the street. One of the things we heard at the community forum, particularly from the bike community, was we don't want more.
When I drove this line, it went from here to Rose Quarter, which is somewhere around, which is over like next to. It's left of Holiday. It's like over here somewhere. Now look where it goes. Where the hell does it go? Oh, this is going to the jail. Bus 70 goes to the jail now. That used to be the 10 when I drove it, I believe. Back in the old days.
Large vehicles going through this intersection. So those are the primary reasons why we chose Southeast 21st. It's important to note that, as I mentioned, we currently operate on Southeast 21st in the southbound direction when we are blocked by the train. We'll go to the next slide, please. Now, the next improvement is to line 17, and this is actually a mitigation that came up during the outreach with the community, and particularly we heard from the ATU. Line 17 operates, line 70, which we were just talking about, goes by the Center Street garage. A lot of operators use line 70 to get to work as well as to get to their road reliefs. That's when an operator is using a bus to get to another bus line where they're going to start their day. And then, of course, at the end of the day, they may get off and also ride back. By moving the line 70 up to Milwaukee, that is further away from the garage today. But line 17, which also operates by the garage, we could increase the frequency of that, helping the operators get to work as well as get to their road reliefs. It also just so happens that line 17 is a very high ridership line with good productivity, and frankly is a kind of the next one in line to be upgraded to frequent service after the ones that we are going to be proposing in our next ordinance are upgraded. So it's perfect timing. Next slide, please. And if we were to, this is a map of our frequent service network as it is today, and if we were to upgrade line 17, that's what it would look like. Next slide. So the outreach for this actually occurred in two phases, but I will tell you that the outreach was for the line 70, not the line 17, because the line 17 came up as a mitigation as a result of the outreach. But the outreach first occurred when we were talking about all the Forward Together improvements. And I won't go through all of this, but you can see here that we conducted a survey during the Forward Together process in various languages, and we had almost 4,600 responses, as well as 7 open houses. 6 of them had
And remember, the Forward Together was foisted on us. It was not agreed to by anybody. These unelected elites decided they were going to do this, and then they rolled out their propaganda machine. Nobody asked for this. This is what they wanted to do. They took advantage of the pandemic to make these changes.
a non-English translation occurred. Next slide. And then outreach, more focused outreach with community-based organizations and presentations to both TIAC and CAT. Next slide. Now, the second round of outreach you actually heard about earlier today from J.C. Vanetta. As J.C. had mentioned, we partnered with his department on conducting joint outreach on both the fare increase and the service changes. And so, you know, as you can see here and as you heard from J.C., there was a survey in many languages and lots of outreach opportunities online, as well as a number of...
Yeah, they did all this after they made the decision. It's important to understand how this works. They made the decisions and then they did the outreach. It's supposed to be the other way around. Before you make the decisions, you do the outreach. But they already made the decisions and then they did the so-called outreach.
Open house meetings, many of which were included translation to other languages than English. And the next slide, as well as focused outreach with community-based organizations. And then the final slide on outreach from TIAC and CAT. I would tell you that the responses we heard were great. We actually, I don't think I mentioned it in this. We did have a separate outreach for the Line 70 change with the Cleveland High School community. And so I can tell you that the general outreach, we heard 55% positive statements, 24% negative, and 21% neutral. And then when we looked at specifically the Cleveland High School survey, we had 61% positive response, 23% negative, and 16% neutral. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Luke Norman to talk about the Title VI report.
The Title VI report.
Thank you, Tom.
The baloney.
President Simmons and members of the board, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 provides the legal footing to ensure agencies are upholding the assurances under Title VI. FTA's Title VI circular requires TRIMET to prepare and submit an equity analysis to the TRIMET board, which I will review with you today. Next slide. This slide provides an overview of TRIMET's equity analysis decision-making process for fare and major service changes. The analysis includes whether a service change results in a major service change. If so, the possible impacts will...
Hold on. What? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. She's dead? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. News on Angie. News on Angie. Uh-oh. Hold on, I gotta find the news. It's coming in right now. Angie is deceased, ladies and gentlemen. That is sad. She was dead in her apartment. And that's what I thought happened to her. Oh my heavens. Rest in peace, Angie. Poor thing. She was not in good shape. Okay, she was not in good shape. Let me show you. Yeah, that's what I said. I knew somebody had to go in there and look and see, because she was not doing well, and they found her dead. That's heartbreaking. It is. Let me see if I can find my little post on her. Where is it? I do too many posts, you know that? I can't find anything because I do too many. Christ's sakes, look at this. There it is. There's Angie. Rest in peace, Angie. As you can see, she changed significantly from when I knew her. Wow.
Will be assessed to measure the impacts on minority and low-income communities. And if the assessment will result in an adverse effect for those Title VI populations, then alternatives to minimize or mitigate the impacts will be evaluated. Next slide, please.
Okay, so look at the whole bureaucracy over this.
TRIMET's disparate impact and disproportionate burden policies establish thresholds to evaluate possible impacts on minority and low-income communities. These policies are applied to line and system-level analysis, which
like
I'll review with you
garbage.
today. Next slide,
Disconnected
please.
elites doing disconnected reports about something that nobody really knows.
Please. There are different methods to evaluate the different impacts of major service changes, including improvements, reductions, and other types of service changes. Since the May 2023 service changes would increase service, this analysis will focus on major service improvements. Next slide. For the May 2023 service change, one route, line 17, met the major service change threshold, which requires an evaluation of potential impacts. Changes to line 70 were too minor to meet the threshold and are not included in this analysis. Next slide. For minority populations, a major service improvement to a single line is considered to have a potential disparate impact if the minority populations within the line service area are at least 3% less than the minority populations of the TRIMET district as a whole. Since the minority population impacted by the major service improvement is above the threshold,
I have no idea what he's
no
talking
potential disparate impacts were identified.
about. I mean, what is this? What the hell is this shit?
Next slide.
What the fuck is he talking about? What is this?
The disproportionate burden analysis for low-income populations follows the same methodology as the disparate impact analysis.
God, look at
So, since the low-income population impacted by the major service improvement was higher than the district average, no potential disproportionate burden was identified. And since only one change was evaluated, no system-level analysis is required. Next slide.
Does anybody know what he's talking about? Because I don't.
So in conclusion, no line-level disparate impact or disproportionate burden was identified for the major service improvement to line 17. Additionally, the service area's minority and low-income populations will not benefit substantially less from the major service improvement compared to non-minority and higher income populations. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Wade?
Thank you for the comprehensive presentation. And I was really glad to hear that there was specific outreach done at Cleveland High School, particularly given the proposed route change. So I do have a question on that. So with the proposal that we have from not providing the 26th Avenue, I think, how much further do students have to walk given the new change?
Well, it's actually interesting. That's an interesting question. It kind of depends on where the students get off. So today, actually, a lot of students get off on 17th Avenue at Lafayette, and they cross the Lafayette Bridge and then walk through Powell Park. So we estimate, and then they cross Powell Boulevard at 26th Avenue. So we estimate that's actually a longer walk than what we are proposing. What we're proposing is a 7-block walk.
7-block walk.
If I remember that correctly. And then, however, the students could also choose to ride to Powell Boulevard, transfer to the 9, and then ride up to Cleveland High School. That's a shorter walk. However, what happens is students, as on their way to school, we drop them off on we first cross Powell, drop them off, then they have to walk across Powell, catch the 9, ride up to 26, then walk across Powell again to get to school. And that is the kind of thing that we're trying to avoid. So while it may be a shorter walk, it does require them to cross Powell, which is kind of what we were kind of trying to avoid.
Thank you. And I just hope that as this proposal moves forward, that we do that type of public education, especially with the students in that community, just so that, they understand, right, that it's like this is a new change and this is how far you're going to have to walk. Yep. I'm just kind of putting myself, as a former student and, right, trying to...
7 blocks is a long walk. Okay, that's not neat. That's not close.
Get to classes on time and all of that, and to make these adjustments, I think, would be important for them to know.
And I should let you know that we've been meeting with a group that includes the PTA and students, not just about this, but about how to make that area safer. And I will even go on to say that my children went to Cleveland High School. This is my neighborhood, so I'm very familiar with how the kids get there. Yeah. Thanks.
Great. Thank you for that explanation.
This is a first reading, and so as a first reading, we need to hold a public hearing. And so I'm now going to hold a public hearing on Ordinance 372 and ask if there's anyone who did not speak to Ordinance 372 during the earlier public comment period, if you'd like to testify about this ordinance, if you would please come forward. I can say no one has signed up to speak to it, so I don't see anyone coming forward. So seeing no one coming forward, I will close the public hearing and continue to pose the question to the board. Are there other questions for staff? It'll be at the next meeting that we consider the second reading, where we would actually vote to approve the ordinance change. So are there any other questions for staff at this point?
I don't have a question. I have a comment. I guess there was a submittal from a community organization. I think it was the actual neighborhood association that had submitted a written comment, and I just wanted to know that had been taken into consideration. Have TRIMET met with them and had discussions with them about the proposed changes?
Yes, I have met with the neighborhood association and have had a good deal of communication with the president of the neighborhood association as well. Our staff also met with, there's some concern about a local business called People's Food Co-op in that area. Our staff has met with staff at People's Food Co-op. They walked around, looked at where the bus stops are proposed. And then we are also due to speak with the People's Food Co-op Board on March 28th. I would also note that just yesterday I informed the president of the Neighborhood Association that we are open to looking at their proposal for bus stops. We have to look at them before we can say yes or no to them, but we are open to that, and approval of this ordinance does not, or the location of the bus stops are not contingent on this ordinance. So if come April, if you were to approve it, we would still have time to move bus stops around, although I hope we could resolve that issue before then.
Okay. Thank you. Any other board questions or comments?
Just to follow up to that, so the routing doesn't involve any safety concerns or any business concerns that were brought forward by the Neighborhood Association?
We have had our bus trainers out there. I think we had a safety person there, but I'd have to go back and confirm. But we do not believe that there is a safety concern. We operate through similar conditions throughout the region. Our operators are trained to operate in this on this type of street, so we don't have safety concerns. In terms of the business, I was mostly concerned about the loading and unloading of the business. In talking to them, they do have a part of their property where trucks do enter, and then they have a portion that has 1 hour parking that they use for loading and sometimes block their driveway. So that wasn't, at least at the staff level, that wasn't an overwhelming concern. But again, we are willing to look at alternative bus stop locations if that is a bigger concern than what we initially heard.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So thank you so very much. We're now going to move to the first reading, a public hearing for the ordinance.
All right, I can't take any more of this. Plus, I'm distracted by Angie now, too, on top of it. Over now for this episode.